As the Amphictyonic League is tightening its grip on the town, the inhabitants of Kirrha still do not want to give 1 inch. For the time being, this coastal city is managing not to succumb under the pressure of an enemy siege which has cut off access to the city from both land and water. Not yet known to the inhabitants valiantly putting up this stubborn defense is that they would soon be facing a far greater problem. This new threat would find its origin within the city's own water supply. This weakness within the defense was discovered by a group of horsemen out on patrol. Something seemingly broke under the heavy weight of the horses and their riders. This is when the besieging army finds access to a water pipe, through which fresh water runs into Kirrha. The stage was now set for one of the earliest acts of chemical warfare in recorded history. This particular historic battle takes place along the coast of the Corinthian Gulf in ancient Greece. The inhabitants of ancient Greece had just entered the 6th century BCE when tensions within this region started to rise. Not far inland, just off the coast, the sacred precinct of Delphi could be found under the looming shadows of Mount Parnassus. Religious pilgrims from all over Greece made their way to this precinct where they could come to worship the god Apollo and the goddess Athena, among other gods. Traversing the mountain pass between Mount Parnassus to the north and the mountains of Desphina to the south, visitors of the precinct would often seek answers from a highly regarded priestess, also known as the Oracle of Delphi. With Greece being made up of many different islands, as well as the general shape of the mainland playing its part, traveling by boat across the Corinthian Gulf was a popular choice. In order for pilgrims to reach Delphi, the harbor within the city of Kirrha was considered the main hub for travelers. From there, the sacred precinct was not that far away, at around about 12 kilometers inland. Over time, the rulers of Kirrha realized that all these traveling pilgrims offered them a lucrative financial opportunity. It was therefore decided that all pilgrims had to pay a hefty toll in order for them to be allowed off their boats and a passage through the city. In addition to the payments of these financial tributes, there was also a rising number of accusations that the inhabitants of the city just straight up robbed and mistreated many of the pilgrims passing through. Putting aside this problematic treatment of traveling pilgrims, even the levy of toll itself was already considered a sacrilegious act, which combined with the other issues ultimately provoked the Amphictyonic League to take matters into their own hands. They proclaimed a holy war against Kirrha, with the stated intention of protecting those travelers who passed through this city in their quest to searching answers from the Oracle of Delphi. At first, the Amphictyonic contingent under Thessalian leadership tried to take hold of the sacred land of Apollo, also known as the Kirrhian Plain, which surrounded the city itself. As expected, this sit not well with the inhabitants of Kirrha, and thus a war between both parties became inevitable. A lot is unknown about the true events that transpired at this coastal city. This is also due to the fact that the first known written information about this war comes from Thessalos, a medical writer from the 5th century BCE. This is almost 1 century after the actual events took place. Additionally, not much is known about the length of the war, only that it transpired somewhere between 595 and 585 BCE. From the accounts available, it can be concluded that at some point during the war, the Amphictyonic League managed to push the Kirrhian population back into their city, as well as cutting off access to the harbor. The city of Kirrha was now under siege. The man in charge of this siege was tyrant Cleisthenes of Sicyon. He was also the one directly commanding the powerful navy blocking the harbor. 2 commanders, Eurylochos and Hippias, were in charge of the land-based army. In addition, the Amphictyonic League was also supported by a contingent of Athenians led by Alcmaeon. With the city being cut off from all sides, there was no way in or out, and yet the inhabitants stayed strong enough to fight off any attempts of entering the city. Cleisthenes, as the head of the besieging army, however, was operating from the comfortable position of having plenty of time to come up with a cunning plan. Luck would have it that such an opportunity would indeed present itself during one of the standard scouting missions. During what should have been a routine patrol through the surrounding area around the city, a group of horsemen stumbled onto something. While riding their horses, it so happened that the hoof of one of these animals sunk straight into the ground. It turned out that they had hit a water pipe, until then unknown to the besieging army, which supplied the city with fresh water. What happened next might well be one of the first ever accounts at chemical warfare within the recorded history of Europe. In an effort trying to weaken the inhabitants of the city, they came up with a plan to infect the water by making use of the poisonous characteristics of the hellebore plant. With the now poisoned water supply running into the city, all the Amphictyonic army had to do was sit back and wait for the result. The Kirrhan inhabitants who drank the water now slowly started to lose their strength, and the long-awaited moment by Cleisthenes finally came to be. With his naval army still blocking the harbor, the command was given for the land-based army to enter the city. The defenders stood no chance against the invaders now flooding over the walls and through the gate. They left no stone unturned as every street was searched and its people removed. Many of the citizens and soldiers of Kirrha would not survive the battle before the invaders finally claimed that victory was theirs. The Amphictyonic army was there with one goal, and this was to restore the purpose of this holy land as providing uncompromised access to Delphi. To them, no one was going to stand in their way. Those citizens who did manage to escape the violence fled towards the Kirrha mountain. For Cleisthenes, though, removing everyone from the city was not enough. His army did not stop as they now turned their attention to destroying every building within these walls. When all was finally done, the lands on which Kirrha once stood were dedicated to the gods Apollo, Leto, and Artemis. It was even forbidden from now on to cultivate these sacred lands or to let animals graze on them. Unrestricted access to the sacred precinct at Delphi was now granted for all who wished to visit. Cleisthenes himself left the battle a far richer man than he had entered, as he was rewarded 1/3 of the entire loot taken from the conquered city. The victorious Amphictyonic League also decided on organizing the first Pythian Games to celebrate the end of this war, whereby Cleisthenes played a large role throughout the games. There are different versions of the siege of Kirrha, as well as different possibilities of how the besieging army found the water supply and what they did after. Whatever really transpired during these events will never be fully known, although one thing most historians agree on is the usage of the hellebore during the siege. Was this therefore the first ever large-scale usage of chemical warfare in Europe? That might be a question of which we will never fully know the answer.